This is just a quick test of the microphone. I haven't changed the actual video settings, so we're just going to see if it works.
Please work.
What is Alex saying?
Okay.
Alex, does it work? Is this any better? Anyone? Good, okay. Let's check the streaming quality. Streaming quality. Yay!
Is that working?
Oh, thank God for that. Oh, to be honest, this was mostly Alex fixing it, so he's a whiz when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Alex, by the way, he was described by somebody as the the unidentified Revolution member of staff. We can now exclusively reveal that is the great Alex.
Yeah, although according to our backers, it is actually me, but sort of Ninja Nina being sort of in two places at once.
I wouldn't put it past you.
I deny any such accusations. Okay, brilliant. So we're live now.
While we were off, did anybody work out that's the song I was referring to?
Did anybody work out the song, or was everybody too busy?
I think they probably had better things to do.
Okay, so let's move on to the actual questions, which I don't have anymore. Oh no.
Okay, no, we know the first one, and that's what do I do on a day-to-day basis? Well, what I think I do and what other people say I do might vary wildly. But I have the enormous privilege of being the director of the Broken Sword series, and indeed all our games. It's wonderful, and you always hear people compliment the team members, but we've just got such a great team. It's just a real pleasure working with some really talented people. I tend to drive, certainly the story and the gameplay elements, maybe with Nigel, with Neil, and then I also keep an eye on the art and the audio. So I have my hands in pretty much every pie, which is a disadvantage in some ways because it means that I do hold things up. But in others, it means hopefully there's a coherence, there's a continuity, and everything complements each other. Both Nigel and Kelly both came from Sony, and that's very interesting because what I realised is that we were stuck in a publisher-dominated system, which is called a waterfall development system, which is where you define all your milestones at the beginning as part of a contract, and then a producer is paid to make sure you hit those milestones.
Yeah.
And it's clearly ludicrous because if something takes a little bit shorter time, then that's fine, but a lot of things you just don't know, like the story. We're still adjusting, tweaking the story, which we couldn't have done. And what those guys did in coming from Sony is brought what's called an agile, or a scrum, which is part of an agile system, where actually it's much more flexible, and you account for the fact that you don't know exactly. You know when you have to finish the game, but you can adjust the milestones fairly dynamically.
Yeah.
Now publishers hate this because they can't say, a milestone will be paid when you reach exactly this.
Yeah.
But it's actually hugely beneficial for the game because it allows us to iterate, to take away features if we don't think they work, to add features, to without avoiding feature creep, which is a dirty word. So yes, I'm involved in all aspects with a wonderful team who are very tolerant actually, because they could get very frustrated, and I'm sure they do sometimes. But it's worked before, and it might be weak areas, but hopefully it's going to work again. And I'm really, genuinely, really thrilled by the way the project is going. We announced that it was going to be postponed to September. We're absolutely determined and that's the end of September. We're actually determined to get really close to that date. And not let it slip beyond that point. So far so good. Ultimately, quality is more important than anything else. Ultimately, we have a responsibility to you guys to deliver a great game. That's what you very generously backed us to do. But we are determined and on track to not slip beyond that September date.
Yeah. So, that must be quite challenging, but are there other aspects that you find more challenging? What's the most challenging aspect of
Well, certainly the bringing in the best possible game within the time and within the budget. We raised with PayPal $850,000, which is absolutely fantastic. I've always said that we put about $500,000 in beforehand from our profits, and it was great to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And so that defines our budget. We can go a little bit over because we can self-fund that, and we can. But then there becomes a point at which actually we can no longer do that. But we don't need to, as long as we manage the game. The game is now a fair bit bigger because of the Kickstarter stretch goals that we promised. It now has a much more dramatic and conclusive ending.
Yeah.
But there are just many reasons why we really do need to hit this new date and not let feature creep take the game and drag it into another quarter beyond that one.
So what about, because we talked a bit about the challenges, what do you find the most fun out of all of this? What do you most enjoy?
Well, for example, we did the very rough animatic of the intro.
Oh yeah, I saw that.
And just seeing it come alive, the layout artist who's a genius, and I've worked with him for. There are challenges, of course, as there are always. He lives on a barge on the Thames, so that's one thing. But years of experience, and when Tim put it together as an animatic, and an animatic is a movie which you put together to mock it up, and you see the cliffs moving relative to each other, and then you go over and you soar down. And what I love about that is that traditional layoutists who really know their stuff know how to actually change perspective dynamically. So if you've got a 3D camera, obviously you can tip the camera to change the perspective. But if you're doing it in a 2D art, then what you've got to do is you've got to actually, as the camera moves up a flat sheet of paper, instead of looking horizontally, you then look vertically, and that's an incredibly skillful thing to do. And there are certain rules, like if you have to change the vanishing point. If you have two vanishing points that you can see at the same time, then your eye tells you that it looks very strange. So when you see this great big bit of paper with the pan that changes, it looks really weird. But when the camera moves down, it has this extraordinary effect of diving into a chasm. It was great to see that, to work on with Neil on the dialogue to make sure it's reinforced, just tweaking the last bits of the theological element, because I've obviously told people that this is about the idea of Gnosticism. It's about duality, God, Lucifer, all of these things, and I really think that it's a story for now, which, because it's a story for now, it's absolutely right to tell it in an interactive way, as we are, through an adventure. And I hope that the interest that I have in the subject matter will translate into the game, and that will then excite you guys, because the core ideas are actually really interesting and haven't become cliched. I know that Kate Moss's book Labyrinth covered a little bit of the Gnostics. I think that's good luck to her, but she's a sort of Dan Brown approach, or indeed Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and a lot of that nonsense. I would hope that when we write these things, that actually we take the history a lot more seriously in terms of trying to be true to it.
I think that's interesting, because we actually got an email through quite recently from a fan saying that one of the things that they really appreciate about the Broken Sword games is that you can really feel that there's a sense of history, a sense of place, that it's founded in more than just fantasy, but there's some
there's a lot more legitimacy, and indeed, Dan Brown, bless him, fell for the nonsense that was the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail and the Priory of Sion, and I don't know if I'm repeating myself, but it was extraordinary, because actually my wife bumped into this guy in a place called Fleurac. He's called Jean-Luc Godard, I think. And he spoke no English, and she spoke no French. But they managed to communicate that I was actually writing the Da Vinci Code. I was working with Ron Howard and that lot, and the Take Two guys. But she managed to communicate somehow. And it turns out that he was in the 70s, he wrote about this guy, Pierre Plantard. And Pierre Plantard was the one that claimed that he had written he was the Grand Master of the Priory of Sion. And what they did brilliantly was that these guys, who were total fraudsters, he was an anti-Semite, he was a crook, he'd been arrested by the Belgian police.
Yeah.
He claimed to be the Grand Master of many secret societies. It was nonsense. But what he did so brilliantly is they planted some papers in the Bibliothèque Nationale, and then presumably hoping that at some point they would be discovered. The people who discovered it thought they had this most extraordinary conspiracy theory, and actually overlooked the fact that 99% of it was absolute nonsense. Then Michael Bainant and Henry, whoever the other one was, wrote, of course, The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, totally buying this hook, line and sinker. And then Dan Brown read The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail and said, this is brilliant, it is fact. At the beginning of this book said, fact, all of these things which are total nonsense. And of course I'd read Holy Blood and Holy Grail before writing Broken Sword, and dismissed it as nonsense. So because just a little bit of research told you that it was ludicrous. So that's it's a very flattering thing to say that people appreciate, but actually we really do take the history very, very seriously, and it actually takes a lot longer to design, because all our puzzles need to have an authenticity. I mean, anybody can come up with a totally unauthentic puzzle because it happens to suit, but what we work very hard to do is mould the real history, the authentic ideas into our gameplay.
Yeah. So how come, Charles, because you're like almost like a walking encyclopedia of knowledge, where does this come from? Do you read lots? Or?
No, just very lucky that a lot of this actually came from research for Broken Sword. Now remember that the first Broken Sword was 1996, and we started writing it in about 1994, and that was before the internet existed, of course, but the internet wasn't widespread. So there was this real sense that you could discover things that had never been discovered before, like, of course, the Priory of Sion, and all that sort of stuff. So I started investigating, and I'd go to France and investigate places like the catacombs, Commanderie, and you'd discover things, you'd make connections that felt very new, and they were very new. So the idea that the Knights Templar had gone over to fight in the Battle of Bannockburn I found particularly interesting. And of course every great story needs a treasure, and this had the treasure. It had the treasure that Philip le Bel, who was the King of France, tried to seize the treasure from the Templars, this huge wealth, and it had disappeared, and the great fleet had sailed. So it basically had all the elements that were really sexy, and then if you drill down, then the more you drill down, the better it got, because of the authenticity of the history.
Right.
So going to places like Rosslyn Chapel, which of course was also featured in the Da Vinci Code. I mean, Rosslyn Chapel is an extraordinary place. It's really beautiful. I mean, it was carved after, it was created after the destruction of the Knights Templar in 1307, and then ultimately in 1314 when Jacques de Molay was burned, as you well know. So it postdated that, but nevertheless there was this sense that there was this extraordinary imagery that, sweet prawns that America hadn't been discovered at that point. So just very, very interesting again. But these were real conspiracy things rather than made up to try and shoehorn into a story. Am I being rather rude about our competitors? I'd much rather praise other adventure games. I think they're absolutely brilliant than this sort of whole rash of pretty nonsensical pseudo-history books.
I mean, I guess it depends also on what people are after, but I do think that Broken Sword is kind of unique in the real sort of sense of history that it brings. I can't think of any other game that quite like it.
We work very hard to do that, and if people feel that, then that's a great compliment and a very flattering thing to have done.
So I've got one question from you guys that I've picked out for Charles. This one's from Onion Gravy. Does Charles feel that he has learned anything positive from having developers around during creating games? And has he implemented any of this in creating PS5?
Okay, so I'm going to sort of answer the question I think was asked.
Yeah.
And what we've said is that Revolution used to be a team of between 30 and 50 people based in a big office. and a project was cancelled, and we had no choice but to cut right back. And we recovered from that, exclusively thanks to the ability to self-publish our games, particularly on iPhone, and then Apple formats more generally. And so we built up much more on a freelance basis, so the team can grow and shrink. Now the big problem with that is that we really do have a wonderful team, and so we want to lose as few people as possible, but there has to be the ability to shrink and enlarge. And one of the great things about that is that by bringing new people in, as I was mentioning earlier, you get new systems. So Nigel in particular, with Kelly, are always absolutely pragmatic about what we can achieve when. And this comes from the new way of approaching it, this idea of Scrum methodology. Because previously with the waterfall, you couldn't possibly determine what you would need specifically. So it meant that you'd put in new features that you quite reasonably hadn't thought about, and then the project risked running out of control. So certainly from the project perspective, we've learnt an awful lot. And then, I mean, people like you, Nina, you've come in from you were a little developer, you did your own thing. People coming in from the university, learning new methodologies. There's a huge benefit of people coming in, and hopefully they'll learn a lot of new things here. And then, if they move on, then they can come back later. They'll have, and certainly my vision for the industry, because the big companies are in big trouble now. As I said in the last developer diary, THQ have gone bankrupt. I mean, that's a massive thing to have happened. THQ are a huge publisher, and the era of smaller independent developers is definitely on us now, and the way for that to thrive, I think, is for people to work on a much more fluid basis. They should earn more by working on this. So ultimately, by moving, the talented people can move between projects, learning, hopefully earning more as well, so it suits them, and it suits all the developers, because ultimately they come back and they bring new skills. Also, as I said in the developer diary, one of the wonderful things about independent developers is that they really enjoy talking to each other and swapping advice.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I really like most of our. I don't know any of the developers that write adventures that I don't get on with, but I was thrilled that Augustin got his scratches, his Asylum. I backed that on Kickstarter. I was delighted to, and he was very sweet, and he thanked me for it. I mentioned that the Telltale guys were really lovely. It was fantastic to be able to talk to them.
You met them at GDC.
At GDC, and also the Daedalic guys with Edna and Harvey, or Harvey and Edna, one of those two. A really interesting little adventure game. I mean, quite low production values in some ways, but really interesting in others. It's basically a lunatic, a girl who's gone mad, who talks to her toy rabbit, and the rabbit talks back to her. And between them, through memories, this is some really interesting ideas. The Machinarium guys, brilliant. And even if you were to look at it from a purely logical financial perspective, actually it really benefits us to all talk, because if somebody buys a Telltale game and they're drawn into the market and they decide they like adventures, then they're going to go on and they're going to buy a Broken Sword or a Edna and Harvey or whatever. So we're actually not in a competitive environment at all. What we're competing with much more, I guess, is other genres of games, or indeed other entertainment mediums like film and DVD. So there is every reason to communicate and to help each other, and it's just a lovely time because of that. I mean, I don't know how many blooming Kickstarters I've backed, but generally, if I know people, I will do, and I'll offer them support, because it's just great to have new, smaller companies thriving, and then working together. I don't think I answered your question at all, then, did I?
No.
You see, I bamboozled you. You've forgotten what the question was.
The question was about positive things that you've learnt from having developers around while you've been making games. Great. So I'm going to introduce you guys to you've probably met Tony before, but I'm going to introduce you to Tony again. Tony's another co-founder and also technical director, is that right? Oh, Charles, can I have my hat back?
Yeah.
Wait, this is Nina and Tony's hat off. You can vote who has the best hat. And I'd like to also introduce you to Joost. Go on, have a seat.
Oh!
Yep, Joost is running off. Oh, he'll be back in a minute.
He's gone for a pint.
Don't know where it's gone.
I'll sit back here again then.
So I'll move on to some questions in a minute that have been sent through by the backers. But they did want to know about the song that we mentioned earlier. So I'm just going to bring that up. What was it called again?
The
song with the hat?
Oh, it was by Mott the Hoople.
What was the song?
It was called Roll Away the Stone. Roll Away the Stones. Roll Away the Stone by Mott the Hoople.
This one. Okay. So I should be able to, in a minute. Oh, it's showing an advert. Right.
It is second only to the great Come Up and See Me, Make Me Smile by Steve Harley and Cockney Rebel from the 70s. Two best songs of the 70s, if you disregard all the David Bowie stuff, which I have to say is absolutely brilliant, and the Stone stuff, and the Beatles stuff.
Sorry, I wasn't listening. There's a guy with a hat in it anyway. I just thought I'd quickly show you guys.
You're forgetting Mud, of course.
Mud and Tiger Feet are the most appalling examples.
Isn't it?
Those Tiger Feet. Oh God, help us.
Where was it?
No one knows what we're talking about.
No. If you go onto YouTube and look at Tiger Feet by Mud, you'll see what a dreadful time some of those songs. And that was one of the successful. I mean, there were worse even than that, and they were bad.
It's a good song, Charlie.
Sorry, it's messing up. I'm doing a terrible job of this. There we go. That should work. Oh, sorry about that, guys. I was just trying to capture a screen region, but of course XSplit just sort of showed up in the middle of it. I'll try and find the guy with the hat again. Oh, there he is. There we go.
That's the one. That's
it's
the one.
The hat.
That's the one. And I think it looks just like Nina's hat. That's why when she walked in, it looked like a cross between Mott the Hoople and Mary Quant. In fact, it would be what Mott the Hoople would be wearing if Mary Quant had designed the hat. Have we got off the subject?
Sorry. Yeah, and also everything. That was very unprepared. It was improvised. Okay, so anyway, moving on to questions. I'll start us off on one to do with love, and I have a nice screen prepared for everyone. The question is from Spider-Matt, who couldn't join us today, sadly, because he's on holiday. But that's, how do you guys decide where George and Nico are in their relationship? Are they still friends, boyfriend, girlfriend? How do you decide this?
Well, we kind of make it very easy for ourselves by just keeping it the same, don't we?
Yeah.
It's almost there, but not quite. It's kind of X-Files type scenario where they're about to hook up, but circumstances kind of keep them apart.
Yes. But it might change.
Quite.
It might change, but it hasn't done so far.
I think I've heard quite a few people ask us, why don't they get together? Why not show them as being together in a game?
At the moment, we have what we think to be an interesting sexual chemistry, and so far, I mean, maybe it'll change in this game. Who knows? But certainly, up until this point, Broken Sword 4, of course, introduced the love interest, which sort of worked reasonably well, and that was to break up the relationship slightly, bring Nico in a bit later, have George in love with somebody else.
Bit of jealousy. Bit of jealousy there.
Bit of jealousy, absolutely. So so certainly we want to play around with their relationship and test it. But we can't talk about what happens at the end of this and whether they finally get it together or not.
No, that you can't have spoilers like that. But they're not going to be getting married, settling down anytime soon.
They don't get married. They don't get married in this Broken Sword. No.
Okay, completely unrelated. Here's one from Marcus. What do you think of the Oculus Rift? Could you imagine creating a new first-person adventure experience for the Oculus Rift one day? To Marcus, the Oculus Rift seems to be perfect for slower-paced adventure games rather than shooters. Now, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's sort of like a VR headset.
And VR means virtual reality.
Yeah.
For those who don't know what VR means.
And a headset is something that you wear.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
I'll just show you a quick picture of what
now,
it looks like.
I haven't used it myself, and I doubt you have.
No.
But it was at GDC, and Ken Perlin, who I met with, had, and he said that the lag is unnoticeable. He said, because what dogged the VR headsets from the, God, was it the 80s or the early 90s?
It was the 90s. It was going to be huge, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
It was going to suddenly take over. And then it was kind of suddenly, I guess the internet kicked in and everyone went, hey, internet, and forgot about virtual reality.
But it was that it was rubbish. And that was the problem, because I remember going to the arcades, big arcade in Leicester Square, and putting this thing on, and the lag basically made it, so all it was a demo of how cool this is, but it does make me feel slightly sick. So probably it was waiting for the technology to catch up, but now Ken says that actually there is no lag
That's
at all.
why there would be these days.
So it's come of age.
But also in the 90s they were saying, it was going to be, you'd put it on and you'd walk about, and no one could quite sort of rationalise how you weren't going to walk into walls and hurt yourself. I guess this one is just for playing games, isn't it? You just sit down and move around, look around.
Yeah, but you could have augmented reality quite easily though, couldn't you? If you put a little camera on it.
That's the Google Glasses, isn't it? All that.
That is the Google Glasses, but the Google Glasses obviously is. I mean, we were laughing about this because you know the way that when you go to a show and you can't remember somebody's name, they come bounding up and they go, "Hi Charles, how are you?" You go, "Great to see you. How are you?" And you don't want them to catch you, so you basically hope they'll look away, and then you can look down at their badge, and you go, "Well, Bill, it's such a long time," and then you've got to try and fish to work out when you last saw. When was it I last saw you? Who is this guy? Jeez. So instead of the conference look down at the badge, there's going to be the Google Glass looking up to the top left-hand corner. This guy. Oh, who is he? Oh, it's Bill. He's Bill. So you think, why did I meet him last? You met him 3 years ago. That's it. So you're looking really like, Bill, how are you? It's great to see you. It's been 3 years.
2 days, 4 hours,
Exactly.
36 seconds.
Yeah, I know, and I've been counting them. So the virtual reality, augmented reality, is really interesting. I think. I always like the idea of those guys running around Manhattan playing Pac-Man. And of course, then obviously with a proper camera, then you won't run into walls. And of course, if something goes wrong, it doesn't tell you there's a car or that you're about to come to a road and you get run over. But in principle, I think
that doesn't sound very fun, Charles.
but in principle, I think there are really interesting things. The idea of zombies attacking you and running away and all that sort of stuff.
Well, I mean, hopefully we'll see more in this space anyway as time goes on. Here's another question from Aaron. In some other adventure games, you had many commands such as eat this, drink this, use this, etc. What made you choose the current commands in the final version of Broken Sword 1?
Well, they all looked out of date, didn't they, and old-fashioned. We wanted to come up with something new.
It was more Beneath a Steel Sky, because I remember a meeting back in '92 in Hull, and we looked at it, and we looked at the temperatures, and we suddenly said, all of these commands like pull lever and get this and push this and drink this. It was just basically going back to the text adventures that came before, and those were all the things you used to type in. Get this, move north, close door, and you didn't actually need that on a graphic adventure at all. You just needed to interact, and so we whittled it down to basically action and look at, and that's
and speak but we could have. With those, you're limited. You're limited to talk, interact, look at, speak.
But really,
I'm
it
not
comes
even
down
sure
to
pickup. Is there?
it comes down to two. Basically, there's two interactions, isn't there? Really, and the cogs or whatever just tells you what kind of action it's going to be when you actually do it.
No, but if you think we've got pickup, we've got examine, we've got
Combine.
interact. Combine is not, but I'm talking about on-screen.
No, but you can do it in the
in the
inventory